Good afternoon and welcome once again to the Week in Review. During the course of the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be taking a look back at the past week and highlighting the major news stories that took place, giving you a second chance, if you will, to see some of the things which for one reason or another you might have happened to miss as they were happening. This week, Ottawa approves the operation of factory freezer trawlers off the East Coast. A former Alberta Premier has been hired by the government of this province as an advisor. Labour unions march on a radio station in St. John's, and the new College of Marine Technology is officially opened in St. John's. We'll have details of those stories and others when the Week in Review continues in just a moment.
From Portabass to Corner Brook to the Great Northern Peninsula and all points in between, join me, Becky Daly, as I tell your stories from the West Coast on NTV and NTV+.
Hi, I'm Rosie Mullally. For the latest developments in the courts to hard-hitting news stories, I'll bring you the news that matters most on the award-winning NTV Evening News Hour.
Well, it was late in the week that the federal government finally made the announcement that a lot of people have been dreading for quite some time, the approval for the operation of factory freezer trawlers off the east coast of this country. Federal Justice Minister John Crosbie made the announcement in St. John's on behalf of the acting Federal Fisheries Minister Eric Nielsen. One license has been granted to Fishery Products International, another to National Sea Products Limited, and a third license has been reserved for another established groundfish company. On Friday, Crosbie fielded some questions from reporters as to what the granting of the licenses will mean for relations between Ottawa and the provincial government.
As far as federal-provincial relations is concerned, there has to be, of course, consultation and cooperation on both sides. In this case, there's been full consultation. This has been a decision which has been 4 months in the process of being made, with every consideration being given to Newfoundland to express its views and its opinion, the same with Nova Scotia and all the other Atlantic provinces. But federal-provincial relations don't mean that the federal government and the provinces are always going to agree 100% on the decisions. Naturally, we have to operate from a national point of view. The government of Newfoundland operates from a Newfoundland provincial point of view, as is their right. In this case, I believe it's in the national interest. I think it's also in Newfoundland's interest that this license be issued with these conditions. Newfoundland doesn't agree with that. Well, that's the nature of the system. They don't have to agree with it, but they've been given every opportunity to make their position clear and to make whatever points they like.
Meanwhile, for his part, Premier Brian Peckford is extremely upset at the decision. The Premier wasted little time on Friday calling a news conference of his own to indicate that the province is now checking into the legality of the approvals and if they can indeed be disputed. Peckford called the announcements a vivid demonstration of the lack of understanding by the federal government of the fundamental importance of this particular cod resource.
We have witnessed the federal government breaking a federal-provincial agreement that was described at the time as the most significant agreement since Confederation. How shall we approach such agreements in the future? We have seen the start of a policy direction in the fishery which, in our view, has the potential to wreak economic and social havoc on the very fabric of our way of life. For the sake of our people, I hope we are wrong, but I don't think so. We have seen this policy reversal in the fishery based not on an objective assessment of all the facts, but rather on the force of a political lobby effort in Ottawa, the like of which we have not witnessed before. It was done on lobby, not on facts. We find the federal government's decision on this matter unacceptable. We will be monitoring the situation as it develops in the coming weeks and months, and we'll be assessing any other things that we can do over the next few days. The fishermen, plant workers, and all the people of this province can be assured we will continue our efforts to have the impact of this dangerous policy negated, the policy itself modified, and the other improvements recommended in this statement realized.
But there was some brighter news for Newfoundlanders this past week. On Thursday, Husky Oil of Calgary announced a major oil find off the coast of this province. The find is being described by oil industry experts as extremely significant. That evening, we spoke with Husky representative Bob Paganchev.
The thing that we're most encouraged about is that the quality of the reservoir is such that we can expect very high productivities out of individual wells, and that's most important when you're looking at offshore development and production.
And you want to do this with a floating system?
Well, we're in water depths. We're in greater water depths, about 100 meters here, and that would get to be pretty expensive with any gravity-supported systems.
Meanwhile, the provincial minister responsible for the offshore, Bill Marshall, also feels the find is quite significant. However, he indicated on Thursday at this stage it's still a little too early to tell if it can compare with Hibernia.
Well, they are comparable. I don't think, the flow figures on Hibernia were greater, and early projections as to Hibernia's reserves were perhaps a little higher than they had proven to be after the delineation wells were drilled. So that you can't just go on the one discovery as has occurred out there. We're going to have to wait and see the result of the testing. It may prove to be bigger than Hibernia. It may prove to be less. But I think the big point is that here we have another significant discovery out there, another place where we can look to where there will, in the near term, be development.
At the same time, though, are people more cautious now than they were?
I would hope that they are more cautious. There was a great deal of euphoria at the time when Hibernia was discovered, and the government is concerned about this because we don't want to fan flames and get expectations up artificially. But having said that, it is a very happy day for the province of Newfoundland because it shows and gives us great hope that there is not just one development out there. There is North Ben Nevis that has now been discovered, and I have every reason to believe that in the near term there will be other discoveries as well.
Former Alberta Premier Peter Lougheed has been hired by this province to act as an energy advisor. While making the announcement in the House of Assembly on Monday, Premier Brian Peckford said Lougheed will advise the province on issues dealing with the Hibernia development, and he will prepare quarterly reports on the Canadian and global energy scenes.
The opportunity arose to have Mr. Lougheed, the former Premier of Alberta, become a part of the team. So he's another member of the team, and that's primarily because we're looking at the Hibernia project right now, and we're looking at other projects down the line. And I thought it important to bring to the team all the expertise we can to ensure that in our negotiations we've covered every T and dotted every I, and with his extensive experience in negotiating with the oil companies over the years, I thought that he would bring another dimension to the whole energy team that we haven't had to date.
What will he do to earn $40,000 a year?
Well, he will be a part of our energy team now in advising government on the status of the negotiations, where he feels we should move, give us his best advice in those negotiations. Secondly, he will be providing to the government on a quarterly basis a report on the global and Canadian energy scenes and how it would impact upon Newfoundland.
Meanwhile, Opposition Leader Leo Barry says Peter Lougheed is a welcome addition. But as we heard that same evening, Barry has his own ideas about the appointment as well.
Well, there's two things that come into play. I can understand why Mr. Peckford went to Mr. Lougheed, because Mr. Lougheed has shown himself to be a person not necessarily with detailed information on the oil industry or knowledge of the oil industry, but a very shrewd politician with good political judgment when it comes to energy matters. And Mr. Peckford needs somebody around him like that because his own political judgment has been seriously lacking recently. The second point, of course, is Mr. Peckford arriving at a mutual arrangement with Mr. Peckford so that in a year or two, when he's going to be looking for a job, he'll be able to go to the government of Alberta and obtain a similar position advising with respect to energy or other matters.
So you think that in a year or two, the Premier will be looking for a job? Is that what you're saying?
When he calls the next election, yes, with 21 days after that.
He won't retire in midterm then?
Well, he may if he sees that the polls indicate he doesn't stand a chance.
New Democrats from across the province gathered in St. John's last weekend to chart the party's course for the upcoming year. NDP leader Peter Fenwick says the party is already preparing for the next provincial election.
A lot of housekeeping we had to do. We filled a number of vacancies on the executive. I'm extremely pleased because we now have Brian Blackmore as president of the party, and Brian, of course, is probably one of the more better known New Democrats in the province. He ran a fantastic campaign in Grand Falls, and I think that it seems like virtually the entire province was disappointed that he didn't get elected, except for Lem Sims perhaps. And now that he's the president of the party, I think it gives us the kind of strength at the top of the party structure that we need. So there was a number of other fill-ins as well, because we had a number of other vacancies. It's been 2 years since our convention, and obviously people move on and so on. But it was generally a rededication of the party to the kinds of organization we feel we have to do to make a tremendous impact in the next election. We function through district associations. It's no use denying it. Without a good, strong district organization, we can't do much. I have a phenomenal one up in Labrador City and Wabush. It's an incredible group of people who are just the most active kind of campaigners you've ever seen. The same kind of thing exists in Grand Falls right now. A number of other districts across the province also have them. We're trying to build those in other centers as well, so that when the election comes, that's where we get our funds, that's where we get our workers, and our finances don't have to be equal to the other parties. We can beat them with half the money and twice the manpower.
Labour unions march on Q Radio in St. John's, and in Torbay, a daring rescue saves one man, but another is lost to the sea. We'll have details of those stories and others when the Week in Review continues in just a moment.
Earth. To all those that share this planet, the call has been placed to lead us into the future. It means leading by example, shining our light across this borderless world so that all will be free to reach their heights. For Canada, as we weave our mosaic into the 21st century, our vision will be called upon. So, step up, Canada. It's our time to shine. NTV.
Some 200 members of the Provincial Federation of Labour marched to the Q Radio station in St. John's on Tuesday to show their support for the striking workers there. Some of the top Labour leaders in this province are saying it's time for the powerful Chum Limited, that's the company which owns Q, to wake up and see that Newfoundlanders are not going to stand for second-class treatment.
The members of the Federation of Labour were out in full force this morning to pledge their support for the Q Radio employees. The union members say it's a disgrace that Newfoundlanders are expected to work at a much lower salary than that of their counterparts in Halifax. Some of the top Labour leaders in this province believe that Chum has to be taught a lesson and has to be shown that the Newfoundland people are not so desperate for employment that they will allow themselves to be exploited by a rich mainland company.
We have behind us here a company that is well known all across Canada, who we as ordinary citizens really expect them to give the whole society a fair break in their newscasting, and they don't even know how to handle their own labour management relations.
Chum, the biggest in Canada, has a confrontation not just with the workers here, but with the people of Newfoundland and Labrador. Mr. Alan Waters, who's somewhere on this globe today, is perhaps not been informed by the people here about we Newfoundlanders. I mean, it is one thing to have a strike anywhere else in Canada. Whatever the time frame for that is, multiply it by 10 when you're in Newfoundland. So if he wants to fulfill his obligation, the obligation which they undertook in 1982, let them do it. They will find no society more supportive and cooperative. If they're not prepared to do it, then get the hell out.
The striking employees say today's demonstration gave them the moral support they needed. One of the strikers, Snuffy Jackson, says it will also result in more public attention, and he feels pressure from the general public is one of the best ways of getting CHUM back to the bargaining table.
We seem to have been walking the streets, and as far as CHUM radio in Toronto is concerned, the only thing we've ever heard from them is just rumors. It doesn't seem like any of them are really wanting to talk to us. And it's a shame. I suppose they feel that Newfoundland's out in the boondocks and they can pay us half the wages that they're paying on the mainland. We're tired of it. That's it.
The people on the picket line say it's been a very difficult battle and one they don't expect to be over in the near future. Right now they are counting on support from other unions. They feel if enough people stand behind them, CHUM will have no choice but to give in to some of their demands. Lynn Burry, NTV News.
The Labour Federation was holding its annual convention in the capital city this past week. On Wednesday, the president of the Federation battled it out with members of the Newfoundland Association of Public Employees. As we heard in this report, the conflict surrounded a decision by the Canadian Labour Congress to hold its annual convention next year at a non-unionized convention centre.
Today was the third and final day of meeting for the delegates attending the annual convention of the Federation of Labour. Throughout the morning, business matters brought to the convention by various unions were dealt with relatively quickly. However, that changed when a resolution by NAPE was brought to the floor. NAPE was upset by a decision by the Canadian Labour Congress to hold its annual convention next year at a non-unionized convention centre. They wanted that changed. However, Federation President Bill Parsons disagreed with the resolution, saying preparation for the convention takes about 4 years. He also said that if they changed locations now, the CLC would have to forfeit their deposit on the convention center. Parsons also suggested the resolution was drafted as a political ploy by an official of NAPE's national body. That brought many of the delegates at the convention to an uproar.
He suggested it was political. Hold it now, hold on. He made statements that had nothing to do with the resolution. He suggested it was political. It was done by individuals for political reasons.
The resolution has been referred back, and when it comes back to the floor, you will have the opportunity to speak to the resolution.
The statement that the resolution was being brought back to the convention's resolution committee brought the NAPE members out of the convention.
Please settle down.
Well, our main reason for going out, we had a short caucus meeting because we had to explain to our people that there's basically what Brother Curtis tried to get on the floor was there was a person attack against our union. Brother Parsons was obviously took the attack and was referring to NAPE. And it put us in a light that we are more or less just following a whim of a person. And this is why we were concerned. So we had to explain to our people that this was the resolutions they passed at caucus on Sunday, and already been passed by our executive and board directors.
Therefore, be it resolved that this convention...
When the amended resolution was brought back to the floor by the Resolutions Committee, it stated that the CLC would be chastised for lack of foresight in making such a decision, and that it guaranteed this never happened again. Delegates to the convention then gave their comments on the resolution.
We merely feel the leadership in the CLC has overlooked a very basic union principle, and as trade unionists, we have a responsibility and the right to provide direction to those people who are at the top when we don't approve of their actions.
And I think myself right here, the foresight should have been, even if we had to hold a convention of the CLC in an arena, in a stadium, and we all were bused there, so be it. But we should be definitely dealing with unionized facilities.
I don't believe that's very much to expect from the Canadian Labour Congress and the leadership of the Canadian Labour Congress to look for the union label and to look for unionised hotels.
They are there to protect us.
After debate on the resolution, it was put to the floor for a vote and received unanimous support. Paul Harpel, NTV News.
People living in NLHC apartments had best beware. In the legislature on Wednesday, the minister responsible, Jerry Din, announced that babysitting or operating a daycare center in such apartments is apparently in violation of the lease. Apparently, in the event of a fire, the corporation would be liable for any injuries. And Din says cases brought to their attention could result in action being taken against the tenant.
It's the kind of thing where it's, from our point of view, it's against the lease. The lease, basically allows the apartment to be operated as a subsidized rental unit, and can't be, you can't operate a business in there. I think you'd kind of turn a blind eye in the event that somebody brought a child over for somebody to look after. But when that comes, when that's brought to your attention, and you find that it's 5 or 6 or 7 children, or 4 or 5, and it's brought to your attention, then you're liable. And I suppose you might even still be liable in the event that there was an accident and somebody got injured or killed in the event of a fire or something, and it was found that a lady was operating a daycare. I suppose the corporation would still be liable. So it's the kind of thing that you have to tread very carefully on, and it's one where, I suppose a normal operation would be a person could look after a child for somebody, but when it's fairly clear that it's being operated as a daycare and it doesn't meet the regulations, and the corporation would be liable in that event, obviously the corporation couldn't allow it to happen.
Mr. Dean, how do you go about policing this situation?
Well, obviously we don't police it. I mean, these are, we try to look at our tenants as people who live in private residence, and we try to give them the benefit of the doubt. We don't go around knocking on doors to see if there's daycares being operated or anything else going on in the house. But when it's brought to your attention, of course, you have to take action.
The Institute of Marine Dynamics was officially opened in St. John's this past week. The institute houses what's being called the world's largest ice tank, or Arctic Vessel Research Basin. And as we heard in this report on Tuesday, government officials in attendance at the opening ceremonies have nothing but praise for the institution and its future roles.
Among its many operations, the Institute will study ice, its effect on ship navigation, as well as effects on offshore drilling activity, specifically the impacts of ice on drilling structures such as concrete platforms. The institution cost $55 million to build and will need just under $6 million a year to operate. Premier Brian Peckford told the crowd in attendance for the opening, it will be money well spent. Federal Justice Minister John Crosby was also at today's opening, and he, like Peckford, had nothing but praise for the new institute. He also said Newfoundland was the best location for it.
The fishery, shipping, what took place on the ocean, now what takes place under the ocean, that's the only reason for the existence of Newfoundland.
Both Crosby and Peckford say the Institute will make Newfoundland the world leader in marine and fisheries innovation. Peckford is confident that fact will bring many customers in Newfoundland's direction. Paul Hartfeld, NTV News.
And finally this week, the body of a man lost in a boating accident on Monday has still not been recovered. The small boat that the man was in apparently capsized off Torbay. Another man on board the boat was rescued by a local resident. On Monday evening, we had this report.
The Royal Newfoundland Constabulary says the two men were apparently out checking salmon nets in Tappers Cove when the boat they were in was hit by high waves. One man was apparently knocked overboard. The other is believed to have jumped overboard in attempts to make it to safety. Torbay resident Albert Codner saw the event from shore.
Well, about 25 minutes past 7, I was looking through my kitchen window, and I seen two men in a boat, and they were going to a net. One chap had a hold to the net, and the other guy was rowing, and the sea came and hit him and pushed it, dropped the two of them out of the boat.
So it didn't flip over the boat itself, did it?
No, the boat didn't flip over, just threw them out.
And what happened then?
Well, they dropped the boys up on the rock, but one chap washed off, and the other fella held on.
Codner says when he saw the two men were in trouble, he and a friend tried to help.
I ran with a rope, and Mr. Goss came at me and got a rope down off the rock, through a rope over the cliff, and he tied it around his waist, and he jumped in the water, and we hauled him up over the cliff. But Mr. Martin, he was gone clear then.
Shortly after the accident was reported this morning, the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary, St. John's and Torbay Fire Departments, Search and Rescue, the Coast Guard, and divers were on hand to assist in the recovery of the second man's body. Their efforts were being hampered, however, by high winds and rough seas. The names of the two men have not been released. Meanwhile, the investigation continues.
And that completes our look at the major news stories for the week of November the 3rd through the 9th. Remember, if you happen to miss something as it happens through the course of the week, be sure and join us each weekend when we'll be doing our very best to highlight the major news stories for you. Let me also take this opportunity to remind you that Monday is, of course, Remembrance Day. Please wear a poppy and remember those who gave their lives so that we may all be free today. For the Week in Review, I'm Alan Rowe, asking that you have a pleasant Remembrance Day and a good week.